All right, good morning, everybody. It is a little after 10 o'clock, and we're going to get the budget meeting started, call it to order. I'm here along with council members Moreno and Green, who are on the committee. Council member Harris to my left is a guest today and more than welcome. A couple of things. One is I got a letter from Bureau of Governmental Research that will be added to the record. Secondly, everybody will see that all the items today say for discussion only, which means there's not a vote. The reason why I'm doing that is because it's kind of procedurally nonsensical to vote on this today in the committee and then not have it go on consent agenda on Thursday. So it would be a performative vote anyway, since it has to be voted on by the full council as a separate matter on Thursday. And then secondly, we're going to jump out of order a little bit. I'll go in order from items 1 through 3. Then I know we'll jump to item number 7, which is the Youth Fair Transportation Fund, and then get back into the regular order of the agenda from there. So with that, I'll call for a motion to approve the committee meeting minutes from May 4th, 2023, moved by Councilmember Moreno, seconded by Councilmember Green. 3 yeas, no nays. That carries unanimously. Okay. Item number 3, status of the 2022 annual audit with Becky Ham. Good morning.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you for being here.
Pleased to report we are in the middle of this year's audit for the 2022 calendar year end. We have received all of the trial balance information from city's administration and lots of supporting documentation. So we are full of information to audit and doing our best to get through it all. We currently expect that we will be able to issue this year's report by the June 30th deadline that the LLA has established. The only thing that I could foresee is if there's something outside of our control, then obviously we would come back and communicate that with you all if there was something unforeseen. But currently we're on track to meet that deadline and really excited about doing so.
All right. Is there anything at a macro level before June 30th we need to know about at this point?
Not at this point. Like I said, I think it's going very well. And I think especially given that the last report was basically 13 months after year end and filed 7 months late, you know, for this administration to come back and be on time and do back-to-back audits. I think, you know, they're working very hard and we're working hard as well. And I think we make a good team and I think things are going the way that they should be.
And I guess the only other thing for me before Councilmember Moreno is if there is a delay for some reason, please just let us know.
Oh, absolutely.
As quickly as you know. Councilmember Moreno.
No, I was just going to say this is really welcome news because ordinarily, you know, we've received updates from you in the past and it's like, well, we didn't get all this information and we haven't gotten this. And I mean, for everything to be so on track, this is really welcome news. I appreciate that. Both your work and of course the work of the administration as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So it's definitely a team effort. And, you know, I think we're all working hard to try to get there because that's where the city needs to be.
Right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Yeah, if you don't mind signing in, that'd be great. Okay. With that, we don't have any online comments about item number 3. I wouldn't think so. Okay, so we'll move now to item number 7, which is an ordinance to establish the Youth Fair Transportation Fund. Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you so much. For the members of the public, as Councilmember Giarrusso said, this is item number 7. What we are doing here is just creating a fund. This fund would eventually have roughly $2.5 million in it, which you will actually see that is later in the agenda, which is item number 11, dealing with amending the ARPA dollars. The $2.5 million would go to provide free youth transit fares for youth and opportunity youth, meeting up to the age of 24. So this is just specifically a pilot program. It could potentially last further than a year, which is one of the reasons why I think it's so important to create this specific fund to keep the money kind of safe there for the RTA to be able to utilize. This has been a great collaboration between the City Council and Ride New Orleans, who's really been pushing for this due to the fact that providing free youth fares would, at the end of the day, not only assist families, but at the same time, be able to get youth to school, to work, much easier. And at the end of the day, provide more opportunities for our youth. Courtney, why don't you come up? Courtney Jackson, the Executive Director of Ride New Orleans. She's really been championing this with many other advocates as well. I just wanted to open it up to you, Courtney, if you want to make any comments on this, and very much appreciate your work.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. This is a great day for transit. We really believe that opening the door to free fare for youth, that opportunity youth as well, opening that 18 to 24 door is going to change so many things. It's going to change access. It's going to allow for opportunity. And it's also going to change this like long-standing narrative that transit is something that people don't want to use, when in fact it is one of the pillars of a thriving, moving community. So we just want to, again, reiterate what you said. This is going to be so important to start, and then also to collaborate with the RTA and other organizations who serve opportunity youth, particularly as it relates to the youth master plan that has worked with youth who have said that access is one of their key barriers, and this is going to help alleviate some of the pain that they feel when trying to essentially thrive in our city. And so we are looking forward to this happening, and we're also looking forward to bringing those partner organizations in along with the RTA to find a creative, collaborative way to make this work. So then we can also open the door to have conversations about how then we can move this to lower income, to elderly, to eventually just free fare for all. So this is going to be a fantastic way to start this, and we'll be able to create a pilot and urge for analysis to see how this works and how we can make it better.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you.
And as I've mentioned, this really just creates the fund, all of the different processes and how to acquire the different passes, via online, we're working potentially with the library. All of that will be set up at a later date. This just kind of starts the process with creating the fund, and obviously we'll move the ARPA dollars as well through an amendment during our full council meeting, should that go forward. But thank you, Courtney, for your work on this.
Thank you.
Do I have any other public comment?
Yeah, there's other
Okay.
public comment parts. The other thing I might just ask is there's translation going on in chambers. So if everybody could just speak a beat slower to allow the translation services.
And I speak
think
so
we should-
fast. I apologize for that. Gracias para tu trabajo en eso. Gracias. Leah LeBlanc, followed by Nellie Capson, please.
Got you. JP was supposed to-
Oh, I'm sorry. After your comment, Councilmember Morrell would like to make a comment as well.
Hi, my name is Leah LeBlanc. I live on Oak Street. The Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance and Housing NOLA support this fund as a means to promote equity within public transit for our youth population, stripping away the economic barriers young adults face when accessing education and job opportunities ensures that they can thrive in other areas of their lives, no matter how far away they live from said opportunities. We look forward to seeing this program implemented and perhaps expanded for other riders in the near future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councilmember Morrell, and then I'll take Nellie.
I'll be very brief. I think in particular, the way this fund is created, people tend to forget pre-Katrina that the RTA and the school board actually had a much more symbiotic relationship. Most kids rode the RTA and did not ride yellow school buses. And not only was that infinitely more economical as far as the cost, it also gave kids the literacy, independence, and knowledge of how to utilize public transit. And many of those young people who would first learn how to ride their first bus route to get to their school and would learn those bus routes and wouldn't have to wait till 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. for a yellow school bus to pick them up, that would be their first step to utilizing public transportation for the rest of their lives. If you trail the growth of the yellow school buses and the lack of utilization with RTA, I think you'll find that it's proportional to the lack of new riders riding on RTA. Because if you're someone who never at a formative age learned that public transit was available, efficient, on time, under budget, as they like to say, then as an adult, you did not have the literacy or background or education. And if you don't understand buses or bus routes, it can be very intimidating. So I think getting youth back on RTA buses, getting that to be part of their process from when they're especially in junior high and high school and establishing their independence will also lead to greater ridership as adults. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President Morrell. And Nellie Capson, followed by Claire Jacqueline.
Good morning and
Good morning.
thank you. I won't take too much time. I'm here representing the New Orleans Complete Streets Coalition, or coalition of organizations supporting safe streets that are built to share no matter how you're traveling. Transportation is access. This is, to me, a no-brainer of a fantastic pilot program that we can use to create access and resolve one of the major barriers facing our youth in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire Jacqueline.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Second Street, representing the Office of Workforce Development Board, Youth Committee Chair. Our chairman and the head of the Office of Workforce Development, who could not be here today. I support this ordinance. The Office of Workforce Development is very excited about this. We do have some concerns about how this will be administered. In particular, we have a recommendation, which is that one, the investment in staff in this one-time set of funds might pull from the opportunity to serve more students. We would like to recommend that Job One serve as the distributor and the central location that both may also serve opportunity youth and youth in additional ways, providing access to that office and a set of screening that already aligns with youth need. In addition, young people in schools have not invested in large scale in the 40-cent fare that currently exists for young people. I do not believe that schools will or can invest in public transportation long-term. If they do, we need to look at the routes that young people currently navigate. As a former school leader of a school that did not have transportation and implemented transportation, access is an issue. Taking a bus to a ferry to a streetcar is not viable. Beyond that, we would really like to see a focus on a particular population and recommend the opportunity youth of our city.
Absolutely, and that's definitely part of this pilot. I think what would be really helpful is for you all to get with RIDE and work together. Because we're all going to have to come together, with all the stakeholders and come up with the absolute best plan and best processes to really have this be an effective pilot. So there's Courtney right there, Courtney Jackson. And I think it would be great for you all to get together. Next is Maggie Herman.
Hi, good morning.
Good
My
morning.
name is Maggie Herman. I'm with the New Orleans Children and Youth Planning Board, as well as the New Orleans Youth Master Plan Steering Committee. And I just want to be brief and express our support for the setup of this fund, particularly for the youth and opportunity youth population, and want to open up doors to be a table as a youth master plan for figuring out what coordination looks like in the go forward position, and appreciative of identifying this also as a space for youth voice, identity, and agency throughout the city.
Thank you, Maggie. You know, I'm going to point you over to that direction too. Courtney, thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, well, that is all the discussion for this matter. Appreciate it, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I guess rather than going back to the regular,
Oh, I'm sorry. Did we have something online?
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
8 online comments.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
The first comment comes from Fred Johnson IV, and they're representing collegiate academies. And the comment reads,
I don't think this-
providing safe, reliable, affordable transportation for young people is crucial to their development and quality of life. For youth, especially those from low-income families, paying transit fares can present a significant burden. Our city's opportunity youth are 16 to 24-year-olds who have been disconnected from education and workforce opportunities. Zero fare transit would increase their access and connectivity to school, work, internships, and more, supporting their success and well-being, as well as the success and well-being of their families and the communities they are a part of. The next comment comes from Maya Garner, representing the New Orleans Children and Youth Planning Board. The comment reads, I am in support of zero transit fares for the youth. Providing safe, reliable, and affordable transportation for young people is crucial to their development and quality of life. For youth, especially those from low-income families, paying transit fares can present a significant burden. Zero fare transit would increase their access and connectivity to school, work, internships, and more, supporting their success and well-being, as well as the success and well-being of their families and communities they are a part of. Next comment comes from Jamie Pate. And the comment reads, I am in support of a special youth fund. The next comment comes from Monique Robinson, and they're from Reconcile, New Orleans, also known as Cafe Reconcile. In support of free transportation for youth to providing safe, reliable, and affordable transportation for young people is crucial to their development and quality of life. For youth, especially from those low-income families, paying transit fares can present a significant burden. Our city's 16 to 24-year-olds who have been disconnected from education and workforce opportunities. Zero fare transit would increase their access and connectivity to school, work, internships, and more, supporting their success and well-being, as well as the success and well-being of their families and the communities they are a part of. The next comment comes from Juliet Daughtry. The comment reads, I support zero fare for you, calendar number 34,180. Thank you for helping young people get to and from school and work. The next comment comes from Emery Kasmerick Johnson. The comment reads, for youth, especially those from low-income families, paying transit fares can present a significant burden. The next comment comes from Ashley Shabankari. The comment reads, my name is Ashley Shabankari, and I work as Director of Operations and Programs for the Trombone Shorty Foundation. In my time in working with youth over the past 15 years in New Orleans, I have found that transportation has time and time again been the #1 barrier for our city's youth to access programs and education opportunities in transportation. The Youth Fair Transportation Fund would be a vital service to provide to our city's youth, and it would help increase their access and connectivity to school, work, internships, and more, supporting their success and well-being. I am in full support of the creation of this fund, and I want to applaud RIDE, RTA, City Council, and the Big Easy Budget Coalition for both coordinating and prioritizing this investment for our city's youth. The last comment comes from Jeanette Jurado, and the comment reads, until now, community requests and needs have not been reflected in the decisions made about these funds. The result has been that law enforcement and the criminal justice system have been the largest beneficiaries of ARPA funds, receiving at least $82.5 million, including, among other things, $32.5 million for recruitment and retention and $15 million for vehicles. We're asking for balance. Public safety also requires investing in preventative public health approaches, housing, youth development, and other proven programs that provide long-term solutions to poverty and violence. That completes the comments.
Thank you. You'll be, okay, Mr. Chair, that completes discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, why don't we just stay with this theme about funds? I'm going to move to item number 8 instead of going back to the regular order. And I will say the genesis for creating this fund is actually as a result of these meetings. One of the things we've heard repeatedly is A, we don't know where the money is, and B, we don't know how it's being used. And I think C, if it is being used, what are the benefits that we're seeing as a result? So this would create the Affordable and Workforce Housing Gap Financing Fund. I realize that's a mouthful, but essentially it's to make sure that money available for affordable and workforce housing is streamlined and in one place. And if you look at the proposed instrument, it takes $8 million from the American Rescue Plan, which had been dedicated to housing, but not specifically to one purpose, $12 million from the first sale of the general obligation bonds, $10 million from the second portion of general obligation bonds, and then $2 million from the NIF, or Neighborhood Housing Improvement Fund. Now, the NIF only has $2.3 million in it at this moment. So dipping into is basically taking all of the money out that currently exists and putting it directly towards affordable and workforce housing. We would expect, even though the NIF millage has gone away, that the NIF will continue to grow because of the STR allocations. And then the last thing I will say is that according to the administration, who was a good partner in working on this, that there are about a dozen projects that if the city has $42 million in gap financing, that we could put 1,500 affordable housing units online. 2 of those are in the process of being routed right now, which means they're going through the process of getting the necessary financing. For anybody who would like to know why it isn't funded all the way, I would say to them that not all of these projects may happen. And so let's see how we progress. But that certainly, I think we and the administration have shown a commitment to funding this where necessary. And if we could get 1,500 more units online in the next 6 months to a year, that would be tremendous progress working together. So with that, I have a few public comment cards: Leah LeBlanc, Terry North, and Nellie Katzen.
Hi, my name is Leah LeBlanc. I live on Oak Street. The Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance and Housing NOLA support this GAP fund as a down payment on what's necessary to guarantee that stalled units are stabilized and online as soon as possible. As the city continues to accumulate money for the Neighborhood Housing Improvement Fund through short-term rental fee collection, we ask that the council continues assigning specific uses for this fund through the creation of new projects or filling funding gaps of existing programs. The NIF could be a crucial housing resource if we take advantage of it in smart and targeted ways. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. All right, Terry, and then Nellie.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Terry North with Providence Community Housing. I am definitely in support of this fund, and I want to thank Councilmember Giarrusso for meeting with me and having some discussions about how difficult it is to do affordable housing and how this is just a piece of what we need to put together to do major projects and to be able to put some significant units on the ground. There is a large backlog, a pipeline of projects, and they're not all Providence Community Housing. I'm not just speaking for myself. I'm speaking for many developers. And it is getting harder and harder to produce those units every day. Our current biggest threshold item is insurance, which I don't think is a surprise to anyone. But just if you can get it, the amount of expense that brings to a project is also affecting our ability to produce units, as well as just gathering funding to be able to put units on the ground. There are some good programs throughout the state that are going to be making some monies available soon. This, in combination with those types of funds, should be able to be really effective in New Orleans. New Orleans has seen a long drought of getting good funds from the state, which does have a lot of the funds available for affordable housing, but we will expect to see some in the next 6 months or so being awarded. And in that case, we'll be able to combine those with funds from the city. So thank you so much for considering this and trying to make funds available for affordable housing. Everyone knows how much it's needed. 1,500 units is a drop in the bucket, but it's a step in the right direction.
Thank you very much. Nellie?
Hey there, Nellie Katzen, Committee for a Better New Orleans, here in support of more funding for housing. We're in the midst of one of 2 massive housing crises in this country, and this city is no exception. As Terry said, 150,000 units, or she said, is 1,500 units. 150,000 would be great, but 1,500 is a good start. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I want to thank all of my colleagues who joined on this. I would expect it to pass on Thursday. Okay, with that,
Online comment,
how many?
one.
One. Let's do it.
This comes from Ann Clayton Chamberlain. The comment reads, thank you for allowing us to comment. I am the current president of the Board of New Orleans Area Habitat for Humanity. As we celebrate our 40th year in New Orleans, we continue to provide safe, affordable housing for low-income members of our community. In the last several years, the cost of land, building materials, and labor continue to be a challenge. Our mission is to provide safe, affordable housing, and we continue to build single-family homes for purchase and also provide affordable rentals that we manage locally. Financing costs continue to escalate, which limits the amount of new units we can build. Increased homeowners and flood insurance further impacts the need to build in a more efficient and fortified manner that we can pass along to the owner or tenant. Thanks for considering this opportunity to help more citizens of New Orleans live in a safe and affordable home. Ann Clayton Chamberlain.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right. So appreciate all the public comment, and we will move forward with that on Thursday as well as the ride share. Okay, so now we'll just go in order 4, 5, 6, 9, 10, 11, and it looks like for now I have comment cards on items 4, 5, 6, 9, and that's it. So 4, 5, 6, 9. All right, so the administration would like to come forward on the presentation on the fund balance discussion, which is the predecessor to discussing these ordinances. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Just getting started. Give us 1 second. All right. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for our ability to have this discussion. I think it'll be important, and we're happy to address any questions that you currently have as a result of it. Norman should be joining me here in a little while to buttress some of the questions or comments, but if you'll indulge us, we're going to go a little bit of the historical context of the fund balance and kind of why and how it's being utilized, how it's being implemented, and sort of the thought provocation that was the design of what our overall financial structure is. So if we dive into slide 3, and this will be a refresher to some of the counselors, and it'll be new information to some of the newer counselors over the overall genesis of where we started, where we're going, and where we've been. This goal is just to repunctuate the challenges the cities faced with our financial stability outside of COVID. Of course, the cyber attack was a huge blow on our financial system that took many years to remake. Hurricane Ida obviously had a significant disruption in the weeks after, and obviously the state's most active hurricane season ever, which affected both the revenues and expenditures. We knew early in the pandemic that COVID would have a significant impact on the city's financials. Obviously, we reached out and we partnered with McKinsey. And in April of 2020, we started to understand the possible impacts of COVID-19 on the city's revenues and what would it look like in the short and the long term. McKinsey used the city's demographic data to help us understand our vulnerability to COVID-19, which is how many people would be affected by the virus, and the vulnerability that would eventually impact our recovery. So we dove into a sensitivity analysis, and this is a tool we use that created and developed 4 scenarios through COVID, and as a result of it, on how the city's revenues would be impacted, ranging in severity. given what we knew at the time about the real-time impacts of COVID was having on the city's revenue and the outlook of returning to normal, the best scenario for anticipating our eventual loss was 150 million in revenue loss. That closely matched what we were seeing and anticipating. So this is a visual of the sensitivity analysis in graphical form that projected our revenue loss time by sector. The difference between the graphs is how long each sector took to recover. The graphs ended in 2020, and we obviously know that the impacts were significantly longer. Just to mirror up what was projected here and then what actually happened, the $150 million scenario projected a 57% loss in revenue. If we actually looked what it turned out to be, it was actually higher, 66%. The sales tax projected a 33% loss. It was 28%. It's a little bit less. The utilities revenue stream was projected at 7% loss, but it actually came out to be above, that's 18%. And then lastly, our fines and fees was projected at a $30 million loss, but it actually effectuated into 52% loss. So it was a little above what we actually anticipated for a revenue loss, but overall aligned enough to make us feel comfortable by using that as a structure. We use the vulnerability index of COVID-19, which really emphasized and projected why we would anticipate a 4-year recovery to the pre-COVID revenue levels. This gives a little example of that. The next slide is just re-articulating our federal support that received during COVID. The one I would bring closest attention to is the CARES Act funding. We had over $200 million of expenses. CARES Act only covered 52 million. As you remember, that went to the state, then to the cities, which siphoned off a significant amount of our $30+ million that was anticipated to address how we address COVID. So would be the only thing I'd highlight there. Slide 9, I think is a good visualization you all have seen, and we've tried to address it real time as close to possible. This visually shows how ARPA is being used to plug the gaps in our reoccurring revenue. The red line is our pre-pandemic reoccurring revenue estimate projections. Light blue is our post-pandemic reoccurring revenue estimates projections. And then the dark blue shows how ARPA fills those gaps in 21 and 22. And of course, the orange shows the future gaps of 23, 24, and 25 that fund balance will need to fill. So I think this visually, and we'll get a little bit more into the details, identifies why the fund balance is necessary at least through 2025 for us to maintain a structural integrity, and then thereafter to ensure a dynamic recovery when we hope those reoccurring to reoccurring match. Okay, the goal of this slide is really just to set up, and this is going to be review for a lot of council members. I know that I'll be just re-articulating things everyone knows, but trying to emphasize for the goal of edification of the fund balance discussion and really trying to create a conversation of clarity, we hope. This sets up how we as administrators think of the financial landscape and start introducing the tools that we think about. Analysis is meant to highlight the comprehensive financial report, formerly known as the CAFR, now known as the ACFR, budget and monthly reports. Planning is the mean to highlight the things we've already known are coming up that we need to find reoccurring revenue for, as well as things we don't know, but expect to happen. So we know that we have a planned expense for example, our fire department. We have a SAFER grant, it's $8 million. That's going to wean off, and we're going to have to pick that up on reoccurring dollars. We have employee raises that could be anticipated at $10 billion a year, as the next 2 years have. But then we also have our unplanned expenses, whether that's legal settlements, federal judgments. Probably the largest piece is grant matches and various different initiatives, also including inflation for materials, fuel, and other operating costs that is highlighted in the existing proposal. Wanted to really visually demonstrate in this slide the things we're going to talk about today, and go into a little bit more detail between the comprehensive financial report, monthly reports, which is all part of a larger machine that we use to discuss and evaluate our financials. This does not include the revenue estimating conference, bond ratings, or the capital budget for the purposes of this presentation. This is really, I think, where the rubber is going to meet the road. The city's statement of revenue and expenditures by fund is intended to report dollar amounts received and spent during the identified reporting period, whereas the city's balance sheet is a statement of current assets and liabilities at a certain point in time. So the financial report shows the end result of just what happened the year over year, and presented what just occurred, the activities that happened throughout that year. So within that financial report contains the balance sheet, and that's on page 41 of our CAFR, 2021 ACFR, and it shows the city's assets, liabilities, and deferred inflows and fund balances within categories, which includes the unassigned fund balance, which is what we'll get into later today, and that's page 41 of the ACFR. The ACFR also contains an income statement. It's called the Statement of Revenues, Expenditures, and Changes in Fund Balance. And this is an important thing to look at as well. It's on page 43 of the ACFR, and it displays what happened over the year that ended in 2021, 12/31/2021. And this includes revenues, expenditures, uses of other fund sources, which results in the net change of fund balance due to those activities. The monthly statement of revenue expenditures by fund presents the cash activities of the city over a time period displayed, year-to-date numbers that are similar to a rolling income statement. Unassigned fund balance is usually abbreviated the term fund balance, in which discussions have obviously occurred between advocates, community members, counselors, administration, and the like, in particular relating to this fund. The monthly statement of revenue and expenditures provides the balances in several funds, but it is not the fund balance reported on the balance sheet. Those are two different things that we really wanted to highlight, and I'll go into a little bit more detail later. The net effect of the revenues minus the expenditures results in a surplus, obviously, that will go to the balance sheet, but the surplus has obligations associated with it at that period and point in time. And we have to figure and determine the invoices that are not booked, the POs that are not paid, and with all the other pieces, those will not appear on the income statement, but will be on the balance sheet as an asset or a liability. So we dive into a little bit of a breakdown of our balance sheet breakdown. So the non-fundable, and I think we can go to the next slide. Yeah. So this provides a little bit more of an example, and it's actually the next slide that I think that we'll dive into right there. So this breaks down where we are looking at our fund balance. And when I've tried to articulate, you see several different line items associated with a fund balance. So you'll see the non-spendable fund balance, the amounts associated with that, which is, it means advances to FEMA, the HUD fund, and reimbursements that are expected to be received within that year. So the audited amount was $41.7 million. The unaudited amount was 50 to 60 million. Then we go into restricted fund balance. These are funds set aside for specific purposes. So the audited amount that you see is 31.65. The unaudited 2022 amount is $65.4 million. And this is the BP fund and the COI balance. The committed fund balances, this is the funds that have been committed for future expenses through open POs or contractual obligations. You'll see the audited 2021 amount is 42.2, and the unaudited right now is 50 to 60 million. Those are the range because we don't have our audit complete yet. And those just refer to our open purchase orders. The assigned fund balance that you'll see highlighted there is to cover future emergencies and cover deficits in other funds. So the audited amount was 27 million. The unaudited projected for 2022 is 33.6 approximately. And these are charter mandated savings funds, as well as the funds associated with carrying us out through the rest of the remainders of 2025. Now, the unassigned fund balance, which I think is most identified as the quote unquote fund balance, this includes other classifications. As you see, the audited 2021 amount was 93 million. The unaudited amount is ranging between 184 and 204, depending on what is committed or not committed.
Gilbert,
Yes.
can I just stop you? Because I want to make sure I understand. And just, I want to go through every one just to make sure it's kind of clearly communicated. So non-spendable means the city has spent money generally in response to a storm or pay-as-you-go federal programs, and that we expect to be paid, but who knows, that may or may not happen.
Go ahead,
Is that
Norm.
right?
Yes.
Partially.
Okay.
Right, it's not just, I know we talked about the mics, hopefully you can hear me. It's not just that, right?
Okay.
Any FEMA related item, including, the 2 billion we received for previous storms, HUD as well, or any other fund that has an outstanding receivable for more than 1 year, we have to reserve our cash as unspendable for a period of time to allow us to receive that money back.
Okay.
So we are a cash-based system. And so that cash is no longer in the door, it's out and paying those functions. We won't get that money back until they reimburse us. So that's what that represents.
Okay. All right. So restricted says funds set aside for a specific purpose. Does that mean we know there's a commitment that's coming up that's separate and apart from a purchase order? Just trying to understand the difference between restricted and committed. Is it,
Sure. So this is the BP fund.
okay, that's BP money
Yes.
alone. Got it. Okay.
In addition to the COI, the loan that we took out pre-pandemic that we have to pay back
Got
this
it.
year.
Got it. Okay.
It just all rolls up into the larger fund balance categories, but these are the delineated breakdowns.
And within the next three categories, restricted, committed, assigned, does the rainy day fund live in there or is it separate?
The rainy day fund lives, let me just make sure, on the assigned fund balance.
Correct.
On this, okay, so this is rainy day. All right, and then committed is, hey, we know that we got to pay for stuff, like there's contracts that are coming up, and so we are committed monetarily, and this is money in the bank for when our bills come due.
That is correct.
All right, and then assigned is rainy day plus other savings that we're squirreling away for hurricanes or other disasters that,
Or to fill those projected revenue deficits for the next several years.
okay.
Yes.
And then finally, unassigned is, it basically doesn't fall into any of the categories above.
Right, is a factor of what is remaining on the other report we talked about, cash, minus those other categories, the difference would be unassigned.
Got it. Okay. And then just to make sure, again, non-spendable is what we're expecting, so we don't actually have it in hand. Restricted is money that we're expecting from BP. We're going to pay off the certificate of indebtedness. Committed are things that we know we're going to have to pay throughout the year. And rainy day, you got to have a super majority vote of the council in order to tap into.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Right, and just, we didn't create these definitions or the delineate, this is GFOA, these are all the accounting standards necessary that we have to follow as a result of the CAFR as well.
I got it. I mean, I think I mostly understood, but if I didn't quite understand, I wanted to make sure everybody in the audience got it.
And I think you had a previous meeting with the auditor and they worked with us determination of how these will be displayed based on anything from GAAP or GASB or things like that, that the entire federal government requires to put it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so this could be a little bit of the genesis of some of the confusion. The presentation of the monthly statement of revenues and expenditure presents the cash activities of the city over a time period displayed, year-to-date numbers that are similar to a rolling income statement. Here, unassigned fund balance is a term usually abbreviated fund balance, in which discussions that we've currently had, but it does not provide the fund balance as we just are highlighted previously. This just gives a period and point of our cash relative to where we are in the current year on a monthly basis. Okay. We can go, this just gives you a little bit of foresight, insight, and what you all obviously do on what we look at, what we monitor on an ongoing basis as we make recommendations and evaluations in the complexity of our billion-plus-dollar budget. Ensuring that we have both short and long-term goals and are meeting all the financial standards associated with a city of this size to maintain continuity. This obviously gives us a little bit of, just throwing it out there, the length of time a budget typically takes to create the planning document that we utilize for the upcoming year. I know Councilmember Jeruso, and we're very supportive of changing the dates here to have a little bit more time to address this because it does get really truncated at that last end of it. So anyway, wanted to highlight just kind of what goes into that.
And Gilbert, so I'm hoping also to streamline the second quarter budget meetings a little bit more too. I think we tried to wring a lot of information. I think the thing I'm the most concerned about is just the money that got allocated from ARPA and fund balance, how we're doing in spending. So we'll work with you all about how we can hopefully make that go a little bit faster for everybody.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, these are our bond ratings currently, and we're very proud of them because this speaks volumes of the financial stability and the integrity of the organization. This is your quote unquote credit score. This allows us to operate and issue debt. This allows us to manage various different pieces of it. And it's vital that we maintain and implement the strategies that both Moody's, S&P, and Fitch determine for us to move forward. They are very much the lifeblood of what our future organization relative to bonding capacity, debt, and all the inflows and outflows that a city with this financial complexity needs at any given point in time. One thing that, and Norman and I are on these calls collectively quarterly, that every one of them highlights is our reserves. They ensure, or the fund balance. They have all said focused on increasing reserves, and you'll see that right here on every one of their outputs. What is so important? So while we continue to persevere to try to keep a significant portion for the future years is directly in correlation with what our bond rating agencies are telling us to ensure that we have a balanced operation plan over the course of the long term. So that's a very important piece that I thought was important and drives a lot of the conversations we have and why we think the anticipation of holding that money for future years is vitally important. It's coming straight from the horse's mouth in a lot of ways. All right, so now we're going to dive into, I hope that gives a little bit of background. Now we're going to dive into a little bit more of the fund balance conversation. I think Councilmember, you did a good job of really breaking down the terminologies associated with this. So we'll just move accordingly and kind of skip over the terminology piece and go into some of the, I guess, let's go to slide 26. So this is the unassigned fund balance calculation. This is what was taken out of our most recent audit and the numbers that are official right now. So this is, of course, total fund balance is assets minus liabilities minus deferred inflows. The unassigned fund balance is calculated by taking the total in all fund balance categories, subtracting the amounts assigned to the other four categories, and providing that final number. So remember that the city's obligations determine the committed and assigned fund balance as well. Other external requirements, whether it's legal, financial, determine the non-spendable and the restricted fund balance. We can go to the next slide. This really gives a breakdown, I think, what the crux of the conversation is. And this is an approximation of where the 2022 comprehensive financial report of unsigned fund balance will land. And it tries to break down categorically where we think we will be when the question is, what do we anticipate the quote unquote fund balance to be? And not to conflate or construe it with the statement of cash, which was the 300+ million, but actually dive down to what is committed and how we're going in there. So you'll see that we started with our base fund balance, then we have the net change of our unaudited fund balance, then we go and start deducting for all those categories we just previously discussed. So we feel without the audit, somewhat comfortable that our net positive result at the end of all of the various pieces is going to give us a range of 26 to somewhere in the 50 million range for that fund balance. And that is net, that is after all the anticipatory spendings that are occurring, the anticipatory revenue recovery scenarios that we have through 2025. And really, I feel gives us some insight on what may be available for one-time expenses in the future should we decide to move down that path. We'll pause there and see if there's any questions, because if I'm not mistaken, Courtney, that's pretty much the conclusion of the presentation. And I feel like this is maybe where we, if you would like, can highlight little bit more clearly, just to recap the entire presentation. Wanted to set the foundation as to why we did what we did, the tools and pieces that essentially help develop that strategy for the long-term financial health, a lot of the important factors relative to our bond ratings and the various credit agencies that watch us all the time and that we have to have constant communications with. And then fast forward to really where we lie relative to our fund balance discussion. Now, ARPA is built into this from that first year because, as you know, the reserves created a lot of the fund balance that has now had us here, and hopefully address any questions that we have not currently had. So, Mr. Chair, I'll defer to you all for any potential questions.
I have just a couple to make sure that I understand the numbers, and then Council President has either a question or a comment. So just going through real quickly for the numbers in red, the 65 million is part of the restricted funds, BPCOI, we talked about it earlier. The 50 to 60 million next is part of what we're expecting potentially be reimbursed by HUD FEMA, but that's a question mark. Then 50 to 60 is committed, so it's open purchase orders. The 34 million is assigned, which is and it says charter mandated savings fund. That's the rainy day fund. And then the last two, the 30 to 51, would both be considered assigned because or committed because they're going to be for purposes that are either reasonably anticipated, such as emergency disaster, or because we've already budgeted money for them. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Councilmember Morel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the slide because, as you know, when we met, I had some concern just about being open and transparent with how much money would potentially be available post accounting to actually be implemented and put towards some of the programming that the advocates have briefed us on previously. Now, on this slide in particular, there are two specific line items that I would like more information on. The first is the 30 million, third from the bottom, amount of emergency disaster reserve not already accounted for in another fund balance category. Can you explain to me how that differs and why it's different than the 65 million we have in the restricted fund balance for emergency disaster reserve?
Yes, thanks for the question. In the past, what we did was use a formula. I think it's 5 years of our expenses divided by 5 years, and it gets a number that we are mandated to put aside, and that's the $30 million. What we had expected, and I think you saw in the BGR report, is to elevate that number to be roughly 20% of our normal expenses. So we're attempting to rise that 30 million from 5% to 20%. So when you add those two together, we're trying to progressively get there. And the reason why we're there is, one, that we have, if you look at the rating agencies, that's what they're projecting. GFO is projecting that as well. In addition to, we have natural disasters that require us to have those things aside as well as FEMA begin to pull back on how they're reimbursing us.
Okay, so just for modification, so basically, the reason why we're looking at potentially 95 million combined in a fund balance for emergency disaster reserve is because looking at best practice models, the amount we currently have restricted is not sufficient based upon analysis by outside groups like BGR.
That is correct, but not just BGR. If we look at some of our previous storm activity, we can project over $100 million associated with Ida and how do we respond to some disasters in our city. And so we have to elevate that because we're not getting the same sort of, in the future, the same response from FEMA. And in addition to that, even if we get a response, we have to use our cash up front. So if we deplete those funds, we're now at the bank borrowing that funding until we get the money back from the federal government. We're avoiding putting the city in that situation.
Which is interesting just because I know from the state perspective, with the budgeting practices we have at the state level, we had certain things like institutionalized rainy day fund that specifically addressed they were kind of an omnibus savings account for a variety of issues. In the city of New Orleans, we don't have something comparable to a just set aside rainy day fund, correct?
Just the $30 million, but the point is growing it, and you're right, it wouldn't just be there for any other use. The only way we can use that fund is you guys give us permission to do so.
Right, so I mean, I guess
said so.
I guess I see what the proposal is for the current excess funds we have from the infusion into the fund balance from ARPA, but I guess from a budget best practices standpoint, wouldn't it make as much, if not more sense for New Orleans to have a rainy day fund that we just squirrel money away in every year as we have budgets and are able to do so, just so that rather than having to basically cobble together one right now so that we can be anticipating a hurricane or other natural disasters. I mean, the reality is based upon our location and the ongoing increased activity of climate change, this is a permanent problem. And unless we adjust our budget practices to acknowledge that we're pretty much always going to need $100 to $120 million in reserve. And had we had a rainy day fund established that requires council approval to utilize with a specific set of rationales for doing so, we wouldn't have to infuse this $100 million in of money that we currently have if we had a rainy day fund that over years we had been putting money into it.
And that's true, Councilman. I think over the years in my research, I started in 18, the city just recovered from deficits, right? So it did not have the ability to create those rainy day funds that you're talking about. But if we talk about semantics, one is emergency, we can certainly all make it a rainy day fund for the same purpose. I think the definition is more important, just the words.
Well,
I think we're talking about the same.
Yeah, I
thing.
think the challenge is that this city, like many cities, runs surplus and deficits. In the last decade, we run more deficits than surpluses, but certainly the goal would be, and I know the legislative intent at the state level of the rainy day fund is that similarly, the state also, since Katrina, has run up peaks and values of surplus and deficits. And the existence of a rainy day fund allowed the state with some certainty that when you had a surplus, it was legitimately a surplus because the rainy day fund was already set aside to deal with potential emergency issues. The fact that we don't have a rainy day fund means that when we have a surplus, the question becomes how much of it is a real surplus, because we basically have to cobble together a rainy day fund that's not an actual rainy day fund, but cobble together a set of funds, not just to reflect best practices, but also, as you pointed out, when you look at rating agencies who are deciding what our rating will be, they look at what your set aside is for things like natural disasters. So I don't necessarily agree with it, but I understand the logic, and that's why I wanted to try and explore that with you. The last one, the 77 million, which has additional fund balance plans, to be clear, all the things that are in these fund balance plans, have all of them been approved by the council already, or these are just things you plan on proposing to the council?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Morell, and I'll look to Courtney and Norman. Some have been approved and some have not. So the vehicles is the vast majority that we had the conversation and the approval for in the previous budget. The new items on there are the identified shortfalls. So property management, we've had some significant amounts of damages to police stations, to City Hall. There's an additional $4 million there for programmatic pieces relative to fixing our facilities. There's some other Q1 adjustments to ITI, meaning that we needed more staff to address some of the technology needs of the city. I believe from memory, we had an increase for EMD. Our services through our mechanics and getting some of our older vehicles was increased, as well as fuel. And then lastly, public safety warehouse. This is a strong desire and advocacy for every chief that we have in our organization. We have no room to store things anymore, no really ground zero to address PPP needs. It was a real vacancy for a lot of the measures here. And I know that some may be in the audience now that can better highlight this, but those would be new pieces associated with the 77 million. And I think in total, that's 7 million. And then the Q1 shortfalls are somewhere in the 10 million. And the largest piece, of course, is the vehicles, the equipment, the lawn mowers, the weed whackers, and all the other things that really had to be fixed or addressed. Otherwise, we would just drain money if we continually just fixed up old stuff.
Right, but just to be clear, in our regular annual budget, we do account for one-time expenditures for maintenance and upkeep. So this is an effort in this proposal to try and sort of get ahead of the curve and using the one-time funds rather than using our annual budget to address these issues.
If I can add to your point, yes, before I start.
Right.
It's almost like having a new car versus an old, right? If you have an old one, it's going to the shop,
I mean,
essentially, right? And we're using our operating budget to maintain that. If we buy new assets, we reduce those lower costs by saving some of that operating dollars that go some other place.
Right, but we could use the regular annualized budget to make new car purchases.
Mr. Chairman, Councilmember
I mean,
Morrell,
yeah.
I think the answer in theory is yes. I don't think we'd be able to do it with the volume that would
Right.
make an impact. And I'll just go back to, I think, 2017 or 2016, before we were here. That administration ran into some vehicle issues, some significant vehicle shortages. They didn't have the cash to purchase. They took out a debt, which I understood why they had to do it. And we ended up paying interest on it. I understand why they had to do it, but it's not something you want to go to Chase Bank to borrow for, $50 million and pay all the interest associated with it, because we're still living that right now.
So on the margins that we're talking about, when you look through here, based upon what you're saying, we're talking about roughly subtracting vehicles out of about $17 million of that 77. Is that about right?
That's about right.
About 17 million that has not been has not been discussed previously and has not been really adopted by the council previously, because there has been some discussion about the vehicles, but not these two other items.
We presented on that at Budget Committee earlier in May, all of the ordinances, and they've been introduced for first reads for all of these
But
items.
they haven't been approved yet.
They have not been approved. They're
Okay.
scheduled to be, they were deferred and they're scheduled to be voted on tomorrow
Okay.
or
And,
Thursday, sorry.
and the 30 million in additional reserve, though obviously is acknowledgement of the best practices and a hope that that fund would be larger than the 65 million. That's not something that's been previously approved as well.
It has, it was approved as part of the 2023 budget.
Okay, so we've already,
It just isn't showing up because of the year. So if you remember, this is the 2022 audit. So it's not going to show up in one of those categories yet, but it will when the 2023 audit is complete next year, if that makes sense.
doesn't?
So we appropriated that money in the
30 million.
2023 budget. It was part of $100 million. Part of that $100 million was already in these identified categories. Part of it wasn't. So we're adding it to those identified categories, but that won't happen until the 2023 audit.
So, okay, so
Is that right?
yes, sort of. So I guess what we're saying is right now, a best case scenario based upon this rough estimate you have here is that 26 to 46 million with the possibility of 17, let's say to 37 million. Well, these 50 to 60, numbers that you could see an additional 40 million on top of that possibly.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Morrell,
We're playing with guesstimate numbers to begin
Sure,
with.
and I guess just to add to that, I think that we will have to do a cleanup on some of the ARPA projects too. So I see, meaning that as what we have proposed in the ARPA projects, not everything's going to get spent in the time period. So I significantly see a future cleanup on the ARPA projects that will add money to that as well. I'm not sure we will see the same level of salary savings this year simply because we did a budget to actuals. But your number, which also could include a cleanup piece of ARPA dollars that has not been expended within the time period, could also grow that number.
I guess my concern, and I appreciate the slide, and I think it puts us in the proper posture to have a much larger discussion, which will probably happen today with some of the advocates, is if you look at what the asks are from those advocacy groups as far as housing and the like, it is certainly much larger than 26 to 46 million dollars. And I think it's important that if we're going to have these conversations, that we have to really try to manage expectations that if we adopt the $54 million in ARPA spend that I think is up shortly, this is potentially all that will be left afterwards to address much of what the advocates are looking for. And if that's the way it's going to be, then we all need to be on the same page that that's what's available. Because I will tell you that in my meetings with many of these advocacy groups, the numbers they have don't match these numbers, which is why their proposals are much larger than the amounts that are in here. And if this is reality, then we all need to agree this is the reality and see if that would change their posture on the 54 spend we have now, if on the other end, they're only looking at 26 to 46. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. President. Okay, I think I just go through the comment cards and then we can take each of the ordinances by number. Remember, we're not voting on anything today, but I have one comment card for item number 4 from Max. And then Max, I think you're on 5 and 6 as well. So, like I said, we'll just go in order, but item number 4, you're up first.
Thank you, council members. Maxwell Trudula, Louisiana Fair Housing. So as we said before, this has been incredibly opaque and hard to follow from the start. Despite that, some of us have invested the time to show up and engage because we've been consistent in our message that we want balance in the way that the city is addressing public safety. We spent millions on law enforcement and we want to see money spent on preventive approaches and to the root causes of violence and poverty. And council members, you've worked with us on this. We really appreciate you. Councilmember Giroux, so you put a lot of time into crafting an ARPA ordinance that would make a down payment on those efforts and shift some money away from law enforcement and to preventative approaches. But I can't tell you how disappointed I was when I saw the agenda for today, because the admin has slipped those same law enforcement line items back in just with fund balance money instead. And the message we've heard from the CAO is that the fund balance can't be calculated, shouldn't be touched, or is already committed, but it seems like it's always available for their priorities and never available for the preventive approaches the community is advocating for. And BGR noted this in their letter, that this piecemeal approach with last minute amendments makes it all the more difficult for us to engage and to ensure that this money has any lasting effect. And so again, Councilmember Morrell said, want to get clear on the realistic piece and the reality. And I'm just still really confused about some of this. If the $50 million for vehicles was already approved, then why is it on the agenda to be approved today? Why is that money already, like, why does that money get squirreled away here and said it's not available? Separately, doesn't make any sense to me why, when we went to the first chart with bar graphs to suggest that we're going to need more ARPA money to replace revenues in 2025 than we do this year. Why are we suggesting that our recovery is getting worse and not better and projecting shortfalls that way? There are some pieces of the reality that I need more information on because I'm not willing to take their word for it.
Okay.
And I'll just say that lastly,
Hang on, everybody.
I think that's why our ask for you today is that unless you're willing to start appropriating, a similar amount of fund balance for affordable housing and youth development programs, that we need to push pause on appropriations from the fund balance, treat them equally, and create a fair process that actually allows for real public engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want to try and answer Because I think, you know, Councilmember Morel raised a good point that some of this has been approved before, but then there's voting on it. So how do we reconcile those two? I think is a pretty fair question.
I think that, let me make sure I understand the question, that the question is some of it's been approved, but now, well, I think it's been approved like we would approve a PO, and now we're doing to the appropriation piece. So we've approved work to happen as a collective we, and now we're in the appropriation because we have the bill for the vehicles, for example, so we have to appropriate it. So the approval happened, and now we're just doing the appropriation piece to pay for the approval, essentially.
Okay. So, I mean, I think I'm gonna try and say it differently. So in other words, the council with the administration approved the spending of it subject to funds being available. And now the funds are available. Now is the appropriation process to pay what's been contracted for. Okay. All right. We've got two more speakers on item number 4, Will Snowden and Morgan Clevenger. I don't have one, so
Good morning, Will Snowden with the Vera Institute of Justice.
I have one.
I was speaking with my colleagues, and one of the things that we were trying to understand is the original appropriation of American Rescue Plan Act funds, and the funds that were not used appear to have gone into the fund balance. And from our perspective, the United States Treasury reporting guidelines and expenditure categories highlights about 6 items in terms of how the money should be used. And those items include public health, things for public health, negative economic impacts, services to disproportionately impacted communities, premium pay, water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, and revenue replacement. And so my concern, or perhaps my question is, as the American Rescue Plan funds are going into the fund balance account, how are we ensuring that the expenditure requirements that are and the guidelines that the United States Department of Treasury has put forward in terms of how the ARPA funds should be utilized are also applying to the fund balance? Because what appears to be happening is that once the money makes it to the fund balance, we're kind of losing sight of what ARPA wasn't initially intended to do. And we're being creative with our budgeting in terms of applying these funds to needs that the city has certainly articulated. I've also heard concern, you know, when we use this term rainy day fund, is it not raining right now? And how are we considering Moody's, S&P, and Fitch ratings with respect to how we're managing the current disaster that we're trying to get our hands around right now? So I think we should be applying the American Rescue Plan expenditure categories to the fund balance so that we can make sure that the integrity and the spirit of those funds are being followed through. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Morgan, you're up next. And Sarah, I think you want to comment on this, but I don't have a card from you yet. So, but I know I'm aware that you want to make comment. All right, Morgan.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have to echo both Maxwell and Will. They were very articulate in terms of asking why. And from the people's perspective in community, we ask why. Why are homeowners not being helped when they're under so much pressure to keep their homes? Working class people, seniors, people that have lived in New Orleans forever are losing their homes. They're becoming homeless. And we still have small businesses that have never recovered. We've lost so much in the past 3 years. Why are we not spending this money on people, not cars and horses and dogs? And, you know, hey, I have a 2010 car. I'm never going to be able to have a new car, ever. I have to keep fixing that old car. You know, that's just the way it is right now. I don't normally talk about my personal scenarios when I come up here, but I have to say my family could not get any penny of any recovery money and lost a 40-year business that my mother built from nothing. She never got a penny. We're not the only ones. They're all over the city. Doors have shuttered, empty storefronts. People's economic situation is terrible. If we do not help the people that pay the taxes in this city, we will have no tax base. We will have nothing. We've got to help the people. My dog is 8 years old. I was just able to raise the money to get his rabies shot, right? So if we're going to talk about spending money on dogs and ponies and vehicles and tires, where are the people? Let's talk about that police later. I'll get to that agenda item later. But I really want to thank everybody that's here today that cares about housing, about people, and about true recovery. Do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to item number 5 now. Calendar ordinance. Oh, Sarah, I'm sorry. I said it out loud and then I forgot.
I know.
Yeah.
It's okay, it's okay. Thanks, council members. So a couple of different things. So many of the members of the audience are here from the Big Easy Budget Coalition, and we call ourselves the Big Easy because these funds really have the opportunity to make a big impact, and they're easy to make, actually. As Will said, this is what the money was for. I really would like to thank you, Budget Chair Jay Russo, for all of your work and your questions and making sure that some of the funds are allocated towards the first phase of the Big Easy deal. I think I would like to also thank Councilmember Morrell for bringing up, we all need to be on the same page. And so when we're talking about public safety and we're talking about public health and what these funds can actually do, what is very clear from this presentation today is that we continue to treat law enforcement like they're the only public safety strategy. They occupy about 6 times of what anyone else occupies in the budget. And so we really need to be really clear about what we are doing when we are focusing money on vehicles and police dogs. Those are not the things that are actually going to bring us safety at the end of the day. We actually really need to think about how do we build, how do we provide for people who have already been struggling, and how do we build thriving communities. And so we'll be here, kind of looking at the rest of this, but I do think that if we, as we move forward with these funds, we actually need to get onto a better page about how we make decisions with respect to these fund balance dollars. There's a lot of synonyms around unassigned and restricted, and we actually need to be clear that public needs to have input for all of these dollars. And so that's where I'll leave it.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, so we'll go in order, remembering we already did items 7 and 8, and I think some people have comment cards on 9 when they kind of mean 11, but we'll just go in order as I have the card. So I think I have 2 comment cards on item number 5, Maxwell and Morgan.
Thanks, council members. Maxwell Chardulo, Louisiana Fair Housing. I'll just say, I've been doing my best to track this for months. We've been at just about every hearing. Today is the first day that I learned that the money for the vehicles had already been appropriated. And as Sarah said at the last meeting, if you're the teacher and everyone in your class is failing the lesson, that's on you. So how is it that that has not been clear? That there have been people scrambling here for meeting after meeting to try and understand how this works, and no one has explained when that money was appropriated or approved or made that clear. And then secondly, for the rest of the money in this ordinance, I really struggle to understand how this gets put in a category of money that is unavailable already when it hasn't been decided on yet. That's up to you. This is a policy decision. And it's really confusing to me how the CAO's priorities don't count as prior policy decisions. They're just already assigned things. But the things that we care about, the things that would impact people, are policy decisions that are going to have to wait until later in the summer. So again, treat these fund balance appropriations fairly. Let's create an actual plan for them and make sure we're prioritizing people. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Morgan, you're up next.
Last night, we had a police community advisory board meeting. And one of the questions that came up and continues to come up is when we talk about the budget, when we talk about resources that are allocated to public safety and their effectiveness, how many police do we have? How many vehicles do we have assigned to the police department? Because as many members of the community have expressed, When they pass a police station, for example, third district, they see a lot of cars in that parking lot all the time. And their question is, do we have enough people to drive the cars that we have, to use the equipment that we have? So if we're going to put another 50 million, is that correct, into purchasing NOPD vehicles and equipment? Or is it just in city vehicles in toto? Can you answer that for me? Because I got to answer that to the community. Is it 50 million for just police?
No,
Okay, so it's,
it's cars, trucks, I think lawnmowers, tow trucks, ambulances.
Garbage
Yeah.
trucks.
Yeah.
okay, and so how much is allocated for more equipment vehicles for the police? I don't know.
We'll look at that number and get it to you, Morgan.
Yeah. No.
Don't know why.
Yeah, we need to know
Okay,
that because
we'll get you
we really need to know. So that 50 million, I'm very concerned. Because again, as I said earlier, and I continue to speak on housing, people, they need a place to live, they need to keep their homes. Vehicles, as the gentleman earlier said, it's raining now. We have hurricane season starting in 2 weeks. Many of my neighbors are not going to make it. They will lose their house. So we need to spend this money wisely and make sure our people are good. A vehicle is just not as important as our people. Thank you. And, okay, number 6 is later. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, item number 6, Maxwell Shirdolo, Nelly Katzen. I think that's it. And Morgan, if you have a card for 6, let me know, but it kind of looks like most people are here on 9th Ward, after that.
Thank you for tolerating so much of me today, Council
no,
members.
no, no,
Maxwell
thank you.
Charity Fair Housing. This is a rededication of American Rescue Plan money. So this isn't fund balance. This is American Rescue Plan money, and Will really outlined the goals for those funds. And many folks have already stated that we've spent a disproportionate share on law enforcement already, and we're trying to find some balance. This is another opportunity to find balance. And I'll be clear, I'm not talking about the walking trail parks and parkways piece, talking about the police dogs and horse trailers, talking about and dog houses. And we're talking about $1.5 million is another gap award to another affordable housing development that could bring 50 to 100 units of affordable housing online. And so are you going to choose dog houses or houses for people? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Nelly. And then Morgan, I don't have a card for you, but you can just fill one out on number 6. That's all right.
Hey there, Nelly Katzen, Committee for a Better New Orleans, echoing what our partners in the Big Easy Budget Coalition have already said. But the NOPD already has the vast majority of the American Rescue Plan and the general operating budgets. Is this the best use of the funds that were intended to help the people most impacted by the pandemic? By everyone in this room's admission, including the administrations, when the pandemic hit, we're looking at frontline workers. We're seeing the importance of those people. Again, this is one more opportunity to put our money where our mouth is. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Morgan.
Okay, just to reiterate the same, again, we are not recovered in any way, shape, or form. And again, I don't normally talk about my personal situation, but it reflects so many people in this city. You know, it took me 3 years to rebuild a fence from Ida because I lost all my income for the almost 3 years of the pandemic. So somebody like me, who a lot of people think I have resources, but I'm just like everybody else. When you lose, and you have to have a way to recover. So I'm here to advocate not just for me, but my entire community, our city. We've got to recover. So the canine, I love dogs. I'm all about some animals. I have 4 dogs that I try to keep healthy. But, you know, right now we have to place the priority on people, on housing, on recovery. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Before I get to
Senator Russo, what comment?
how many?
4.
4? All right, let's do them.
This comment comes from Lisa Tenenbaum. Giving any money to the wildly inept, overly funded and useless NOPD is a ridiculous and scandalous misuse of ARPA funds that should be going to make this community better, not to indenture animals to serve the NOPD. Do better. Next comment comes from Deshae Greeley. I support the ask of the city council to do two things today: rebalance our priorities and fund more housing, transit, and other community priorities before giving more funds to the NOPD for police cars, dogs, kennels, and horse trailers. We urge you to put homes for people before homes for animals. Second, commit to funding the urgent and unaddressed community needs in the Big Easy deal later this summer when the city announces what is left in the fund balance.
You're too late.
The next comment comes from Eric Greeley. And the comment reads, I support the Big Easy deal by asking for a balance. Public safety also requires investing in preventive public health approaches, housing, youth development, and other proven programs that provide long-term solutions to poverty and violence. The next comment comes from Casey Giroux Davis. And the comment reads, in order to achieve a perfect union, achieve justice, secure domestic tranquility, defend ourselves, achieve wellness, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, we must take a stand and hold firm for our promised freedom. We must work together across the board in unison and each do our part in protecting all citizens from fear and oppression. That completes the comment.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll move on to item number 9. I have 4 comment cards: Maxwell Fiordolo, Nellie Katzen, Erica Zucker, and Brandon Hawkins.
Thank you, council members. Maxwell Chardula, Louisiana Fair Housing. So thank you, Budget Chair Giarrusso, and members of the committee. This is the ordinance that we worked really hard on and met with all of you about to try and make sure that we're creating a little down payment on balance in this process, where we shifted some money into language access, into a labor audit, the Affordable Housing Fund, and the RTA. Those are huge. That's really important, and we really appreciate you doing that. And there's also a bunch of NOHD money in here for preventative approaches that we support. However, as it stands with this additional $3 million, and I know it's going to be amended to $7 million for a public safety warehouse, we can't support this anymore. The whole point of this was to get something that everyone can agree on that shifted some of that money away and created some balance. And as I said before, like, unless we're going to start appropriating fund balance money for our priorities too, for the priorities of the people of New Orleans, like, we cannot support these piecemeal approaches for more public safety funding without a real comprehensive plan and without some parity. Thank you.
All right, Nellie, Erica, Brandon, and then Jeanette and Sarah.
Nellie Katzen, CBNO, again, calling for balance. At the start of the pandemic, again, frontline workers were the greatest, both the most at risk and the most impacted. This body passed a resolution saying that we are going to prioritize the most impacted and the most at risk people with American Rescue Plan funds, period. That's what it says. That resolution is on the books, it's there. Furthermore, we committed to transparency. We have not had that. The U.S. Treasury has already started to review American Rescue Plan funds and has stated that they are prepared to audit and potentially claw back funds that are not spent appropriately. They've already started to do this in some other municipalities. It's really important that we get this right, that we're not conflating different pots of money with different requirements, and that we're using this as an opportunity to build trust and to make the big changing investments that are easy to make. So I thank you for the investments that you have started to make in that and ask that you continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Erica, Brandon Hawkins, Jeanette Wardo, and Sarah.
Thank you, council members. Erica Zucker with the Workplace Justice Project at Loyola Law Clinic. I think I may have checked the box for supporting this, but I want to follow up on what Maxwell said. Support the part that isn't about putting $3 million, now $7 million into a public safety warehouse. We really want to thank the council. We're part of the Big East Budget Coalition. I want to thank you for working with us about how do we bring this ARPA money to vulnerable residents to increase equity, to create access to transportation, to public health, to housing, to make up for the tremendous losses that our people suffered during the pandemic, which is what these funds are intended for. But we are and continue to be concerned with the additional funds that are allocated to the general fund that are not allocated in line with the intent of the ARPA funding. And we'd like to continue to work on that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Hawkins, Jeanette Wardo, and Sarah Jolly.
Good morning, Brendan Hawkins, representing ALAS Youth Advocacy nonprofit here in the city of New Orleans. I would like to say that I want to thank you for the investment that you have already made with the ARPA funds into the things that our community needs the most. But I've also been an educator and an advocate and a mentor and a volunteer in this city. And when I look at our youth and I speak with our youth, it is important that we invest in our future by investing in our youth and programs like youth development programs and community violence intervention programs. Many times our youth, because of idle hands, they get into trouble or incidents may happen. However, they have aspirations to do other things. They want to do a skill, a trade. They want to learn something. They want to be involved in sports and things like that. And if we don't have those resources in our city, our youth will continue to feel like New Orleans is not the place for them. New Orleans is our home. It's a place that I love very much. It's a place that they love very much. But it breaks my heart when I hear youth say, when they graduate from high school, they want to leave and they want to go to other cities around close, Houston, Atlanta, wherever, because they feel like there's no opportunity for them here in our home. So let's invest in proactive measures and not only reactive measures. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Jeanette Wardo, Sarah Omajala, and then Morgan. Good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, I wanted to echo the thanks from my colleagues for the Big Easy Deal Coalition and to reemphasize that, as Nellie indicated, we do need to remember what those priorities were that we set for those that are most at risk, and for transparency, the two things we're still struggling for. And I do want to say I support the Big Easy Deal, and I appreciate all the hard work that all the coalition members have been doing. But we do need to remember these commitments, rebalance our priorities, and fund more housing and other community priorities before giving more funds to NOPD for police cars, dogs, kennels. As Ms. Morgan pointed out, people are really struggling. And although I may have my own ideals about what funding needs to go to for police, the bottom line is we do owe this to our community, our people, our kids. And we just ask that you continue to work with us, and hopefully we can make things work for the better for everyone in the community.
Thank you. And I'm gonna raise that point, Jeanette. Sarah and Morgan on number 9, and then Nellie wants to speak on item number 10 before we get to 11.
Okay. So I'm on number 9, yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. So again, I guess I'll just repeat, I think what we're all asking for here. So I have to thank you again, Councilmember Giarrusso, and then other council members actually as well for working on this first allocate, or this last allocation first, I'm not sure where to call it, but let's say this last allocation for ARPA, but only the first allocation on the Big Easy Deal towards investing in preventative public health approaches and housing and other programs like, equity programs that allow people to actually engage with this process, including the language audit that y'all are allocating for, and also the labor audit to make sure that the things that we have passed are actually the labor ordinances we've passed are actually in effect. Today we're asking council members for that this is for two things really. So one, let's really rebalance these priorities. I think that there is a little bit of a chrome elephant in the room. We continue to make allocations to NOPD, and then we see stories about how those things have been wasted on different pieces. And so before we can continue to make another $3 million to the public safety warehouse or another 4 million for that, let's just remember, we also wasted about $41,000 on chrome rims. So for police vehicles, so that's an issue. And so that's the first part of it. So let's really rebalance the priorities. And then the second piece is please commit to funding of these urgent and unaddressed community needs that are in the Big Easy deal later this summer. So there are $20 million that we have talked about for youth programs that aren't going to be funded in this allocation through ARPA or fund balance. And so we're asking for a commitment on those, similar to what Council Member Morrell raised, that we're not on the same page about how much money is left. And so for the money that is left, that all of that should go to the Big Easy deal, because that is actually what's going to get us public safety over the long term. So, or begin to get us public safety over the long term. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, Morgan, you're last up on number 9.
Thank you. I just want to advocate again for our homeowners. I know every conversation about affordable housing has to include affordable homeownership. And our New Orleanians have a long, long history of every demographic being able to own a home in this city. And those neighborhoods, our culture comes out of those neighborhoods, and we lose it. We've been losing it. This is almost a final, stretch, because in my neighborhood alone in the 7th Ward, I know at least 32 homeowners who have lost their homes in the last 3 years, whether it's through high property taxes or hurricane damage that they couldn't repair, no insurance payouts, losing their job in the pandemic, or their family members losing their jobs. So how much are we willing to say we're ready to lose? Are we just ready to lose all of the core of our people and just turn it over to a massive tourist city where everything is about the tourist? We have to have our people whole. And so one way we can do that, of course, we all are aware of the high insurance cost. One opportunity here is to help people recover with the new code for the roofs that would bring their insurance rates down. So I'm just putting that out there. Think about it. How can we help our homeowners stay in their homes? Thank you.
Thank you. Director Arnold is here. Do you want to address the issue about the warehouse? Because I think that keeps on coming up, and sort of candidly, it doubled. So I think we'd like to know about that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. Thank you for having me. We had a unique opportunity to pursue a piece of property next door to EMS headquarters in the coroner's office. It's 3035 Earhart Boulevard. Many would remember it as the used to be Iron Mountain Shred-It warehouse, where they would do document destruction and things of that nature. It's about 60,000 square feet. It's an incredibly robust building. It has HVAC. It has office space built into it. It's currently being used as a Mardi Gras float den. It has roll-on, roll-off capability. It has loading dock capability that we currently do not have. It has a yard or available space at the property that in the future for expansion, or if needed to park vehicles, it's there. I think it's uniquely positioned right next to the Union Passenger Terminal rail yard. We've been looking at this for a few years, and the owner is interested in selling. One of the things that has been in our capital budget request, along with EMS and New Orleans Fire Department for the past several years, is additional public safety warehouse space. We are, it's a combination of both being packed pretty much to the rafters with what we currently have, and then also losing space. Fire department has lost some space. They were storing things at MSY at the New Orleans International Airport. Obviously, that's not an ideal location as far as geography, but regardless, they've lost that warehouse space. EMS is consistently indicated they need warehouse space. We have a lot of trailers that have evacuation and disaster supplies, medical equipment, search and rescue equipment. We currently store those outside. That is not ideal. This opportunity would be excellent for us to be able to store a lot of that equipment inside, prolonging its life, making sure that it's available for use. All agencies right now have an abundance, particularly NOSEP. The fire department and EMS have a lot of PPE right now. And obviously that's from, what we've had to, endure as a community over the last 2.5 years. We want to make sure that we're storing that properly and that we're able to rotate that in stock. We can do that with EMS and the fire department as part of their medical response duties. We'll continue to give those supplies out as needed to medical clinics and others that approach us for support, as we've done for the last 2.5 years. But this would give us a space where we could actually put all of that in one location and be able to constantly track and monitor that. There's a whole lot of great reasons with this. I think the proximity to the rail yard is going to be crucial for us in the coming years, when I know I'm like a broken record about it, but when we can get that rail service between New Orleans and Baton Rouge, it's going to be an absolute game changer for us as far as evacuations and hurricane response. And I think that having this facility right next to that railroad yard where those trains would leave, depart from and return to, will factor into our planning in the future as far as evacuations and keeping people safe, potentially during an active approaching hurricane. And so for that reason, I know that there's been some money that has been requested for this project. My office, we're in full support of this. We hope that, it's understood that this will be a boon for public safety as a whole. But really, when we talk about the disaster supplies and the things that can be kept and protected in there that currently we do not have the space for, I think that it benefits the community greatly, particularly as we approach June 1st. And we all know that hurricane season is always right around the corner for us. With that, I can answer any questions that you might have.
Councilmember Morrell, then Councilmember Harris.
Director Arnold, thank you for being here. This is going to seem like a very roundabout question, and I don't know if it predates your time being here, but as I recall, the original RFP for the Naval Support Facility was for it to actually be our storage facility for emergency equipment. Am I correct?
I bristle when it's brought up, but yes, I mean, that would have been an incredible facility, a public safety facility. It predates this administration clearly, but yes.
It happened during the Landry administration. I guess here's my issue. And I only recall that because as a legislator at the time, there were a tremendous amount of people, especially in the affordable housing network, that were kind of flabbergasted that the city's original RFP for naval support basically was the city saying, hey, will someone come rehab this building so we can pay you rent to store emergency equipment in it? And I will say, and this is not necessarily a check on I'm definitively in support of the new proposal, but it certainly seems to make infinitely more sense than the previous one. The question I have, and like I said, this might be difficult because it predates you, I'd love to find out how much money we wasted on that feeble exercise to look at the Naval Support Facility in that posture, because I've never been able to get a clear answer on how we did an RFP and award based upon it being emergency storage for emergency preparedness equipment, and how that turned into what it is now, which I don't even know what the current posture is of the RFP or what it was, but I would love to find out how much money the city utilized under that original RFP, and how what we have there now is no longer a proposal that includes that portion. I would agree in the current state that Naval Support Facility is in, I would not park anything there because it'd be stripped probably within seconds. But at the same time, had we at the time when we evaluated what was best for the city as far as an emergency staging area, the location you're selecting makes way more sense. But just as we're considering an expenditure for this, I'd love to find out how much we wasted on the other one, because that would kind of inform a lot of us as far as guiding what we're doing with money regarding emergency preparedness. So if you could find that out for me, I know it predates you.
It does,
You
and
can
I
find out.
can, you know, there was several different kind of evolutions of what they wanted to do with that property, and one area of one building, a few stories would have been was warehouse space, and could have been, I think, even more than emergency preparedness. It was looking at a citywide logistics function, but clearly that didn't come to fruition. I think that this property, it's not the same thing, but location wise, size wise, and the current condition that it's in, I think that it's something we can work with for the future. And I think it's something that's reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah.
So how did it go from 3 to 7 million? I know that initially there was a $3 million price tag, and now it's $7 million.
3 million was what we were initially, basically what we brought over from our request from capital at the time. We also looked at other options as far as building on existing city property. I think what we found was that with the economy in the state that it's in, with the price of construction and building going on right now, we weren't going to get anything even remotely comparable to this for 3 million. So we're putting in a budget, I believe, that I think can get the building and any needed improvements that need to occur. One that I would say right off the bat would be probably new fencing around the facility just for security. But other than that, that's kind of the trajectory this has taken from the beginning. We looked first at existing facilities, then we looked at possibly building, and then this opportunity kind of came to us, and we wanted to approach it.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the old VA, and I know that there's space there. I know that there's some emergency equipment, I think, that's being stored in that building
I'm putting
currently.
stuff all over the place.
Yeah. I know that, for example, Parks and Parkways also has some warehouse space as well. So I'm just wondering if you've been looking at other, like you said, city properties and working with other departments to see if there's an alternative to acquiring a brand new building at a price tag of, I don't know what the listing price is, but the total budget amount is $7 million, which, as the advocates are saying, that's a good chunk of money to be storing vehicles and other equipment versus having available housing for people.
No, I understand, you know, I understand everyone's,
Angst.
I understand angst.
Yeah.
I do. I think this is an opportunity, you know, that only comes around, comes around rarely, where we can find something like this next to an existing city property near the interstates, near the railroad, that I think can help us. And this is not just storing of vehicles. This is disaster supplies. This is MREs, water, cots, the things that we would be generators, the things we would be asked to bring to bear. And right now I have a small warehouse near the Superdome that's actually in proximity to this. We have a very difficult time right now with putting anything else in there. As far as the VA, there is a lot of space there. It's not warehouse space. We have to use pallet jacks to sometimes hand unload commodities to get them into, it's a hospital.
Sure.
You know, so other city departments, we've had great relationships with both other city departments and other government entities. For a long time, we've stored things at NASA Michoud Assembly Facility. I mean, I kind of have stuff all over the city. I think this is more of an opportunity, not just for my department, but predominantly for fire and EMS to bring together some of their supply shop functions, a lot of that PPE. And again, those trailers that have a lot of medical equipment, durable medical goods and search and rescue equipment that they're currently storing outside.
Yeah, I know some of those vehicles have been broken into, medical supplies taken, needles specifically taken. So I understand the need. I'm just questioning the amount. Do you know the listing price of the building?
I do not know the listing price. I know that from our perspective that we have to get an appraisal.
Okay,
And that's what's going through process right now. I just signed the documentation upstairs for a professional services agreement to move it forward through law to get a commercial appraiser out there by June 5th, to have a report by June 5th on the appraised value. My understanding is that whatever the appraised value is, the city will have to pretty much go with that appraised value.
so it could be more than $7 million. It
don't
could be
think it will be.
less than $7
It
million.
could be less. and
Okay.
I don't think it will be more.
Okay, thank you.
And Colin, I don't want to belabor this anymore, but maybe one thing that will help is getting to us. I think Councilmember Harris is, it sounds like by consolidating operations, you're actually creating more efficiencies, even though there's a big price tag and it doubled. So the I don't need it today, but the explanation of taking things from Mishu, from other parts, putting all those in one place, what does the ROI look like?
When we took our public safety chiefs on a tour of this, it became very clear to me, and we're going to have a plan for the space allotment in this, because people were very excited about the ability to bring some of this stuff indoors and store it properly. And so, I think it's important, and we will have that.
Councilmember Harris?
Yeah, just to make one last comment about that, if you're taking stuff out of the old VA, that could free up space to be used for additional shelter space, temporary housing, interim housing. I think that would be a big win for the city.
Absolutely.
And so I think I agree with Councilmember Giarrusso that we need to see the ROI total and how much space will be freed up that maybe we could then reuse for housing, like the advocates are saying.
Sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Director
you.
Arnold. All right, one public comment on item number 10. Nelly?
CM Druso.
Oh, we have one. Sorry.
That's
Thank
the
you.
last one.
Yep, thank you.
This comment comes from Joseph S. Hareen Mueller on behalf of Unity of Greater New Orleans. And the comment reads, on behalf of Unity of Greater New Orleans, a collaborative of 60 agencies working together to end homelessness by providing housing and supportive services to people who have been unhoused. I want to thank the council for their willingness to engage with people and organizations represent workers, youth, unhoused persons, and other vulnerable constituencies. These are those whom Congress envisioned needing and receiving the support of the ARPA program. We are glad to see funding prioritized for maximizing the capacity and efficacy of the low barrier shelter and providing the gap funding needed to put affordable rental housing within reach of those at or below 50% and especially 30% of AMI. Investing in young people, working families, and the most vulnerable in our society is the most effective way to build the safety and security we all seek. Good leadership will put us on the right track to end homelessness. Every time I turn around, I hear the need for more deeply affordable rental opportunities. These do not come cheaply, but the city's fund balance, a surplus created by ARPA, presents an opportunity to invest in housing. I exhort you to go to the next step and dedicate $99 million to deeply affordable rental opportunities and to also fund the other priorities of the Big Easy Deal Coalition. Thank you.
All right, so Nelly and Sarah on item number 10.
You could tell there was something on the tip of my tongue at the end of the last comment, and now's a good time to bring it back. So CBNO, as you all know, and some folks at home may not, Nelly Katz and CBNO. We help people understand, navigate, and influence the decisions that impact them. Many of those decisions are made here, and the most important ones are about the budget. Budgets are a moral document. We show up here and encourage people to show up here because the money matters where it's going. The entire discussion today, I think, underlines two really major issues regarding our budget. One is our budget information systems are insufficient to allow us to make real-time decisions together. I mean, the city administration, the council, and the community. We lack the transparency that we need just fundamentally to make choices on a day-by-day. I think today's discussion really indicated that. We do budget education every year at dozens of meetings, hundreds if we can, around the city to help people understand what's being proposed in the budget and how the process works. And in order to prepare that, we make charts and graphics and things that help people really understand on a basic level where this money is going. We have to distill a 600 to 800-page PDF document and manually copy paste into a spreadsheet of our own in order to make those presentations, to do work alongside the city to help people understand what's going on. That is one example. It's the tip of the iceberg of a much bigger problem. The second is that the public input process is pretty drastically insufficient. On slide 20 of the CAO's presentation, he indicates the planning process. The heading says the budget takes place over several months and considers input from departments, administration, leadership, city council, and the public. However, the bullet points that follow don't mention the public even once. I know, because I know this process, that where the public has the opportunity to plug in is usually between bullet points, the third to last and the second to last bullet point, which is pretty late if we're starting the budget in July. Waiting until October or November to hear from the public really isn't serving our needs well. We're seeing that here today. We see it every year at budget season. It's a really good opportunity to plan better. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're here to help,
Thank you.
as always.
All right, Sarah.
Thank you. So Sarah Moshla, Vera Institute of Justice. And I just want the record to reflect that we're not bringing up the issues of police spending because we, for some reason, hate police or have any animosity around that. I have been accused of being a cat lady, so that's why I keep bringing up the dogs. But we're really actually bringing this up because we spent time evaluating the impact these funds allocated to the Big Easy deal would have on the community and would have on community safety. And so requesting money isn't enough. Have we actually demonstrated the impact that allocating for dogs and vehicles will actually have on community safety? We haven't done that. And so we need these funds to recover from an emergency that is ongoing, that has happened. And so I do thank Councilmember Harris for raising those concerns that asking for the funds not enough. You actually have to demonstrate that they'll actually be the greatest and best use of those funds. Thank you.
Thank you. And I guess just in closing out before we get to item number 11, which I'll turn over to Councilmember Green, I said earlier that when we come back in June and July for review, and I went back through and sort of did the math. We, the city and council allocated about $104 million for non-NOPD, what I would call public safety, quality of life purposes. So when we come back, it's important, I think, both in keeping with Nellie saying the money matters and Sarah's point about demonstrated impact. The 14.7 we've already dedicated to youth services, 6 million for victim assistance, 15 million for public health, including maternal home visits and unhoused population, which of course is actually higher now as a result of the grant funding we've received, $20 million for blight remediation, beautification. I would argue the $9 million for paying off judgments is part of that as well, because if you've had a judgment against the city and you haven't collected your money, that is important to your bottom line and to your well-being, both economically and from a peace of mind standpoint, and almost a $36 million for catch basin cleaning, the sewage and water board substation, the right-of-way maintenance, and the citywide EV charging plan. So that's about 104 that I know will be very much of interest to us in July, in addition to all the points that we're raising today.
And just to add, I have a list too that could add to that 104 and I think you highlighted, and there was also significant investment in early childhood, the millage that was passed that we also take into account when we look at the overall landscape of where our priorities and investments are with our money and our dollars.
Yes, I will continue to agree with early childhood education as being the significant piece that we're all paying for. All right, so with that, I will turn over the last item to Councilmember Green, and I know that he wants to make a statement, and then we have public comment.
Mr. Chair, I'm glad that we have the opportunity to continue today, as you all started that discussion, to demonstrate the city council's commitment to funding activities that involve youth in our city and provide opportunities. The city council has funded 1,000 jobs for youth at the request of the administration. We've made significant revenues available to New Orleans Recreation Development Commission to sponsor free camps throughout the city and also to provide programs, including such programs as archery and canoeing and swimming, and paying for lifeguards to train them. The city council shows its commitment to youth in what it does in terms of its investment, making a moral stand relative to the importance of youth in our city. So therefore, it gives me great pleasure to bring forth this request for an amendment that would make money available in the form of $2.5 million, which would be added to the $1 million that the city council has already committed to developing the 9th Ward Field of Dreams project. I want to make it clear that it's more than just a stadium. It is an opportunity to invest in a community, the Desire community, in which there is significant opportunity and significant need. The Desire community is the home to the great George Washington Carver High School, the historic George Washington Carver High School, the site of what is soon going to be the multipurpose center, the Desire Florida Multipurpose Center. Homeowners who have been in that community for decades. Also the Sidney Collier Vocational Technical School, and also other institutions that don't get enough attention, but that need to get more attention. This is more than a stadium. It's an investment in the future of a neighborhood that is very significant and very historic. So I'm going to, at this time, ask this council, and it's for discussion purpose only, to commit to, on Thursday, approval of this amendment that would make $2.5 million available to the 9th Ward Field of Dreams project, which would basically, with the input of the federal government in the form of $3 million and also the input of the state government in the form of $3 million, make this stadium a reality. Something that is going to benefit this community, but benefit youth from throughout the community. Again, for the third time, I'll say it's more than just a stadium. It's an investment in youth throughout the city that will have an opportunity to use this facility. And also it's an investment in a community that is a proud community that has institutions in it that don't get enough attention, but that also have an opportunity to grow a community that really could serve the citizens of our city well with its growth. So at this time, I do have cards, but I'm going to ask if anyone who is here who hadn't turned in a card to feel free to turn one in. But I'm asking for your support, and let's go public with the comments that we have relative to this particular project. It seems that I have all cards in support, which is a good thing. So at this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Arnie Fielko to come forward for 2 minutes.
Thank you, council member. Thank you, chairman. It's always wonderful to be back in the council chambers. I chaired this committee some years ago, and I commend all of you for the great work that you're doing. So this has been a labor of love the last 4 years, the 9th Ward Stadium. I'm the chairman of the board for a new corporation was formed 4 years ago called 9th Ward Stadium, Inc. Our job was to try to go out and raise the funds in order to build this magnificent project. And Councilmember Green, I think you said it very well. This is not just about sports or an athletic stadium. This is about an anchor and an investment in a community that very much needs it and could serve as an economic catalyst for many, many good things that'll come in the future. To me, the common theme of the comments that I've heard the last couple hours is how do we use federal funds to be able to help people? Well, I can tell you, I can't imagine a more important, impactful project to help people, and especially our youth, than the project in front of us and the amendment that you're putting forth on Thursday. The building of this facility will help us in so many areas, from youth health to recreation, to crime prevention, to economic development, and so many others. And we're very excited about it. I want to just tell you that we have raised through our federal and our state partners over $7.5 million as I stand here today. Our best numbers tell us that at 10 million, we can finish the job, we can get to the finish line, and with your vote on Thursday, we will be ready to go. We have a very good process that's been done over the past several years. We have a cooperative endeavor agreement with the New Orleans public school system. As soon as we raise the total funds, they will go out, they will bid out for architectural services, they will bid for construction. We will have a third-party manager. I want to highlight that, with expertise in sports facilities, actually running the facility through a bid process, so that this is a facility that we will be proud of in 2 years, in 20 years, and hopefully beyond that, which I think all of you know in New Orleans is not always the case. So I thank you for your time. I thank you for all of your support. I have to tell you, on behalf of my board and myself, we have spent literally hundreds of hours over the last several years to try to put us in this position. And we are, if I use an old football expression, we're not only in the red zone right now, we're about the 2-yard line. And if you can help us get across, we're ready to score the winning touchdown. So thank you very much. And we have some wonderful people here that took their time, that have submitted cards, and hope that you will listen to their thoughts. Thank you.
Mr. Fielko, can you state on the record that if the council approves the money on Thursday, that this stadium will be built?
Absolutely, 100%. And then we will continue, our corporation will continue to fundraise. We've got some other ideas in that regard. There is also an advisory committee that will be created under the cooperative endeavor agreement. So we will have a continuing role, not only through construction, but after the facility opens, again, to make sure that this is the type of facility that the community and the city at large can be very proud of for many, many years.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. We'll go through comments at this time. I'll just remind our commenters that we, so that everyone can get in and the public can get in, that we will limit comments to 2 minutes. Pastor Lisa Y. Williamson.
Good morning.
What does that orange and green represent?
Oh, you notice that orange and green. Come on, class of 1982.
All right.
Pastor Lisa Williamson is my name. I hail from the Ninth Ward, the Desire Housing Project. I completed 34 years of military service. And I'm saying that about me because I came from the Ninth Ward. But the Ninth Ward had so many resources for us, for a person like me, to be able to develop, to become a soldier, to become a chaplain, and to get almost a doctorate degree coming from the Ninth Ward. But again, there were resources. So this stadium that's going to be built for the Ninth Ward is really going to bring about some good economics for the community, for the working class, and also for our youth. Growing up in New Orleans, the biggest thing is having functions for our youth and for them to know that we really, really care about them. Now, Mr. Falco, along with the coaches and a whole lot of other people, have gathered most of the resources that we need to open this stadium, Councilman. And we just need to get across the finish line. Like you said, we need the 2.5 to go forward. The Ninth Ward has been under the radar. Has not much been going on there, not a whole lot of development. I think Sydney and Collier Delgado is the last big project besides Carver School being built for the community. So with Sydney and Collier Delgado building that up, it is almost a for sure thing that the area is really going to grow and bring about some good. We already know a lot of the stuff that we hear on the news about the Ninth Ward. We want to flip that. In this stadium, as you have heard, people say today, human capital, human capital, human capital is so important. And it starts with our kids, y'all. Started from me as a little girl growing up in the Desire Housing Project. And then this is what I developed too, all because I had the resources of the city and there were councilmen and people who really, really care about the growth and the development of all of the city and not just a particular area. So back to the Ninth Ward and that stadium, the Field of Dreams. Y'all, we need to see it happen. We want to make it happen. Come on, help us out with that other 2.5 so we can get across the finish line. Huh, as we say in the Army, huh, that means agreement, huh?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Pastor. Denise Johnson. Gilbert. Sorry, Gilbert. Is it Christian? That's all right. Your last name, Gilbert?
Shawty.
Okay, sorry. Gilbert, how you doing?
Good morning. Appreciate you guys for having us. This stadium would mean a lot to the Ninth Ward because a lot of our youth right now, they don't have transportation to different facilities and things like that to work out. There's a league that goes on, the 7-on-7, that's big and it's popular right now. A lot of our kids don't have the opportunity or not exposed to it because they don't have the resources to travel outside of the city to get to those things. This would really be a great influence for our kids to have something more valuable and important to do. And a stadium and a facility like that would give them the resources they need to better themselves and to also have something to do other than just roam around the streets.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments and for coming today. Kenan Drake.
Hey, good afternoon. How y'all doing?
Good afternoon.
My name is Kenan Drake. I'm a passionate alumni from Carver. I was born and raised in the desired neighborhood. I'm a now homeowner, and I was at Carver from 98 to 2002. And I actually dreamed of something like this when I was playing ball. So when they say field of dreams, I'm actually one of the people that dreamt about this. So whatever you guys can do to support this on behalf of the community and me, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Thank you for coming down today. And thank you for investing in the community in which you grew up. Marguerite Dahl Johnson. How long have you lived at this address, Ms. Johnson?
65 years. I'm 65 years old.
Same house.
I was born and raised in the Upper Ninth Ward, Florida Desire community. And I went to Carver when the Black Panthers first broke out. So I've been there. We have been fighting for this community 65 years, because my mom was a community activist. Our community, we are like family. Everybody know everybody. And for this to happen for our youth in that community would turn our community around. We will bring in economic development, jobs, and our youth could stop standing on the corner and hoping something happened for them. So we're asking that the city give us that 2.5 mil to help us to cross that finish line. And I'm also the president of the Upper Ninth Ward Florida Desire Community Association.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments and your commitment to your community. Do we have any other cards? I see another board member here or so. All right. We have some low-key people out in the audience, but we appreciate your work. So Councilman Jeruso and members of the council, I know that we have co-sponsorship that is going to get us the votes that we need. And it's again, an important project for our city. It says something more about what the city council is doing to invest in our youth. With the support of the administration and the work that we are doing as a community, this is going to be a project that people can be very, very proud of. I'm pleased to see some of the changes, the investments that are taking place very quietly in the community. So proud of Carver High School, not only just for the basketball championships, but because of all of the youth who are going out there doing positive things, moving on to college and other jobs. I see investment in that community that's taking place even on a city level, removing some blight, cutting some lots. I also see, maybe most important, is private sector investors investing in new properties on Metropolitan Street, for example, Mr. Randy Greenup and others who have invested in the community, knowing that the future of the desired community is better than what has been portrayed. And we must invest as we can as a city to make sure that there's a continuity of this investment. Again, the city is investing, but the federal government and the state have already invested. And Councilman Jeruso, that's a pretty good combination. Let's make this happen on Thursday. Thank you very much, Field of Dreams, your board and staff, representatives of the community for coming here today. And I look forward to our meeting on Thursday and the approval of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your leadership on this. And I'm happy to co-author. With that, we stand adjourned. Thank you, everybody.